Recorded. Hi everyone. So we're recording now, and thanks so much for coming. It's really great to see everyone here. My name's Greg. I'm the community lead for Plastic Free Chesterfield, and we're one of over 700 community groups all over the UK who are working to reduce single-use plastics in our area. And it's really great to see everyone here. We're going to have Andrew. I'm just going to introduce Andrew in a minute. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Andrew giving a presentation all about compostables and all hopefully looking at the issues around biodegradables, compostables and greenwashing. So it's really great. It's a really useful subject, and it's a really great one to start our series of webinars off. We run webinars on the third Wednesday of every month. And so if you're not, I'll send everyone who's joined a link to our mailing list, and you can sign up and hopefully stay in touch for future webinars that we do. So, but it's really great to start off today's webinar with Andrew. So, yeah. So, okay. So I'm just going to introduce Andrew now. So, if everyone can make sure they're on mute, that'd be great.
Oh,
that's great. No worries. There's all you know. This is why you're on mute. Yeah, it's a common one now. But yeah. So right. So Andrew, Andrew's the founder of award-winning Earth Friendly Foodware Limited, who supply compostable food and drink packaging and composters. And also Refuse and Reuse, who offer reusable homeware products, and North Devon Soap, who also supply handmade bar soap. He's a volunteer for Surfers Against Sewage, community leader for Westwood Ho, and he's founding team member of Plastic Free North Devon, and he's also chair of the Planet Earth Games. If anyone's seen that on Facebook, that's some really good stuff. The Planet Earth Games, I'd really recommend checking that out. Andrew's helped produce a plastic-free guide for businesses to help them to help Surfers Against Sewage with some guidance on plastic-free businesses, and he's organised Plastic-Free Festive Fair, Spring Fair. He's made a film called Westwood Ho Rises Against Plastic.
You don't have to do everything.
Yeah, he's done a lot, and the most recent thing he's done is he's leading the Ban Cheap Body Boards campaign. So if everyone hasn't checked that out, do check out the Ban Cheap Body Boards campaign, which is getting lots of support. There's a petition on there, and you can show your support for trying to take action on cheap plastic bodyboards. And so he's even been on BBC 5 Live to talk about it. So that's quite exciting. So I'll pass over to Andrew. So thanks a lot for coming.
Firstly, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I've admired Plastic Free Chesterfield for some time, and the work that you guys are doing, led by Greg, just needs constant rounds of applause. Greg and I met on a Surfers Against Sewage webinar, where he kind of picked up on my role within Surfers Against Sewage, and asked me to come and speak with you all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through everything. There's a question and answer session at the end. As with all subjects around this, there are rabbit holes that we'll try and avoid going down. And I hope it's of use to you. So I'm going to share my screen with sound. Bear with me. Let's start again. Can everyone see that? Greg?
Yeah, that's fine. And if you can't, if there's video, if there's people's video icons come up on the thing, you can click on to minimize the video to kind of see the full screen. So just thought I'd let you know if you're struggling to see the whole screen there.
Okay, brilliant. We'll crack on. So as Greg introduced me with a whole list of different things that we've done, I'm sure in 3 years' time, Greg's list will be a lot longer. I started with Surf Against Sewage back in 2018, I think. And the Westwood Hoe Appledore communities were the third and fourth communities, or fourth and fifth communities to be signed off in the UK. So we're kind of in there right at the start when everything was a bit tricky. And the messaging had not fully filtered down to the business community, but we did have the Attenborough effect behind us, and we created a lot of interest, and to date we've had a lot of successes. I want to talk to you about the confusions around compostables, especially the plastics, and the dangers of greenwash. So let's see how we get on. Right, so the first thing to say is the problem that we really face is consumption and overconsumption, and single use just fuels that. So whether single use is using compostables or using oil-based plastic, the real problem is that we're over-consuming, and this can be evidenced by looking at Earth Overshoot Day. Now, I don't know how many of you, if we were in a room, I'd do a bit of a vote, but I don't know how many of you have heard of Earth Overshoot Day. But this is a day by which we have used in any year all of the resources that the Earth can produce, in very simple terms. And last year, even in the pandemic, the Earth Overshoot Day was the 22nd of August, and it was 3 weeks later than 2019, which is great, but it still leaves 4.5 months of the year left where we're negatively impacting the Earth's resources. And unfortunately, these, although positive news, and I agree with presenting things positively, I think there has to be a dose of reality so people really understand. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see how The Guardian reported this. Now, The Guardian is kind of climate change friendly, plastic-free friendly and the like. But the headline was that it declined. Now, although that's factually accurate, if you're just flicking through headlines, you'd think that we're kind of making a really positive impact. And the fact of the matter is, we reduced it from 5 months to 4.5 months. And that is it's a very worrying sign. And I'm afraid to say that single use fuels this, because it makes the consumption of everyday items, be it food, drink, or beyond, just that much easier. They're more available. When I used to go to the beach, my grandma in Wales would give us sandwiches. They'd be in a bag. We'd have a bottle of cordial, and that's it for the day. And it lasted you till tea time. If you go to the beach today, there are steady streams of people at takeaways wanting chips. Why you have chips on the beach baffles me, but people do, obviously. Sausages, pasties. It's just an incredible smorgasbord of items to consume. And what sits beneath all of this, of course, is packaging. And if the packaging makes it easy to sell that food, it makes it easy to consume that food. The sum of the parts is that we're over-consuming. And the real problem here is over-consuming and not necessarily single use. But we'll explore that in a little bit later. So, greenwashing, what is it? Well, essentially, it's telling people something that isn't there. Green these days is a highly popular thing to be associated with, and most companies now are headlining what they're doing to help the environment, help combat climate change, help reduce their plastic. In some cases, looking at palm oil, no palm oil, looking at deforestation. There's a whole range of different issues that especially companies would like to become associated with. But it's also true with things like politics, where regardless of the colour of a party, that does make a difference. They kind of cuddling up to what is an environmental almost agreement across the majority of people, that we need to look after the earth better. And if people can have that green light shone on them, or have their product looked on as being environmentally friendly, then happy days for them. But it isn't always as it seems. And I think what I want to do this evening is not explain it or to give you the conclusions, but to give you the signposts and hopefully some thinking tools that would allow you to look at things perhaps in a way where you can challenge them slightly differently. So we'll kick off with the age-old argument of what's the difference between it all. Well, there are actually four. I've only put three at the top. There were four, but I'll kind of put it in. Well, the first thing to say is that all plastics degrade. Everything degrades. That's what happens. And petroleum-based products break up in different environments in different ways, but everything it degrades. So we can make that kind of safe statement. But biodegradable plastics can break up without oxygen. And this becomes the key differentiator between the two. If you talk with a more science-based person, and without getting into the science of it all, the difference between biodegradable and compostable products is that biodegradable products can break down without oxygen. That's the science. It's very simple. And the trouble is that people interchange these terms, and products that are biodegradable also mean that they're compostable. Well, no, not always. And products that are compostable are always biodegradable. Well, yeah, kind of, but not necessarily. So being being quite clever, people have come up with different types of plastics as well, just to help us on that little confusing journey. So you may come across something called oxidegradable plastics. Well, what these are conventional polymers, and they have chemicals added to them which accelerate essentially the fragmentation. Now, if you go to a petrol station, I was in one today, and the garage were proudly offering oxidegradable plastic gloves. Now, I don't understand why you actually need a glove. You can bring your own glove for starters. You could wash your hands, which is what we've been encouraged to do so. But they were very proud of the fact that these were oxidegradable gloves. Oxidegradable means that this plastic breaks up more quickly. What that means is it can get into the wildlife food chain quicker. If you put a piece of oil-based plastic, say a PET bottle, on the ground, it will take a long time to degrade. But if you put a piece of oxidegradable plastic on the ground, the sun will get at it and it will break up. It will break up quickly. And the challenge that we have is it impacting our wildlife. And when plastic breaks down, it presents itself as a foodstuff. And not only to those birds and other animals where the product is degrading, but when it rains, it gets washed into the drainage system. And when it hits the drainage system, it has, we think it gets filtered by the water companies before it reaches our rivers and hence onto the sea. But that is only half the truth. The truth is that in terms of Southwest Water, they estimate around 40% of the bits, and we're talking very, very small bits here, are actually extracted from the water. Now, you may have seen some reports. There's a lot of talk at the moment around fabric in washing machines, and there's a big number that's always touted of 700,000 fiber micro or nanoplastics that come out of every wash. Now we'll talk about that in a bit, because that's not entirely the case. But the reason why that ends up in the sea, and back in 2016, an organisation which I'll introduce you to later estimated that 30% of the plastic soup in the oceans at that time was made up of microfibers and tyre dust. Now consider this: if you have in the middle of Chesterfield an oxy-degradable plastic glove at a petrol station, it's dropped on the ground, gets blown to the side, gets into the bushes, starts to break down, the wind blows it a little more into the pavement, it rains. And where does rain go? Rain goes down the drain. And that will take it on a little journey and eventually ends up at the sea. And for those that say, well, that's not possible, then why are we now so concerned at the evidence that is showing microfibers in the ocean that is coming from washing machines? I think you've got, Greg, a presentation, a webinar coming up on the dangers or the filters on washing machines.
Yeah, next month on the 17th of March, we've got a webinar from Marine Conservation Society, who are campaigning on this issue at the minute. Yeah.
So this has been something that's been, in a sense, beneath the counter for many years. And I guess the oxy-degradable plastics, one of the biggest threats is not just their ability to break up into tiny pieces where they were dropped, but also their ability to be swept into the drainage system, into rivers and out into the open sea. And it's just another plastic in the sea. So, as you could probably pick it up, all of this should be simple, but it isn't. And I'm afraid to say that many of the businesses who are selling their products are aligning themselves with environmental arguments. They're just not cutting it. So let's have a look at compostable food and drink packaging. This when it first started to become popular, was almost framed as the silver bullet. This was the way forward. This is how we're going to take plastic out of hospitality, and hospitality is a big thing in the UK. So compostable food and drink packaging is the way forward. I remember the One Show, and Matt Baker on the day Surfers Against Sewage brought their piles of rubbish, of ocean collected rubbish, to the studio, thanks to Viridor, and dumped it. And Matt Baker's picked up a compostable coffee cup, dancing around saying, look at this, it's compostable, look at it, this, it's compostable. And I'm afraid to say that the fact that it's compostable is better than it's oil-based, but it's not really the answer. So let's define what compostable is. So it's something made from natural materials. Okay, so for instance, bioplastic is made from cornstarch, and the process of making bioplastic is similar to making oil-based plastic in terms of stretching of polymers and the like, through which the materials are made. But instead of using fossil fuel, they use natural materials. The second key definition is it can break down to natural elements. Now, as you'll find out later, not all compostable products are 100% natural, and therefore there is a toxic residue that is left because of the additions that manufacturers make. And then finally, the dictionary definition, which is really useful, is that for something to be compostable, it must break down within 90 days. And the benchmark is paper. That is the benchmark for something being compostable. So the products that claim to be compostable are really stretching the edge of the envelope here into lengths of time for their degradation that certainly is not within 90 days. So let's have a look at the products. I'll just whip through these because I'm going to switch back to camera and kind of show you what they are. But these materials are all used in compostable products. It doesn't matter whether they're cups, takeaway, clamshells, knives, forks, spoons, salad bowls, makes not a jot of difference. Bagasse is a recycled sugarcane material, made from recycled sugarcane material, where essentially they take the sugarcane that is discarded after the sugar's been extracted and press it. This is a natural material. It's like crushed leaves. PLA is polylactic acid. This is a bioplastic. It's made from cornstarch, and you find it's increasingly popular in in takeaways with plastic forks and knives, with kind of cold cups and bowls, and it's also used to line many of the cardboard products like coffee cups and food cartons and the like. CPLA is a crystallized PLA, so this product can withstand a greater heat. So a CPLA product is heat resistant. It's used to make lids on coffee cups. It's used to make knives and forks. And our CPLA is a recycled CPLA. Now, these nuances that sit here are actually very, very important, because all of these products you see here are just categorized as compostable. And before I go on to NatureFlex, all of these above give the impression that if they are discarded, and even if not disposed of properly, in the natural environment, they'll just break up. And that is simply not true. Now, NatureFlex and cellulose are two materials often used to make bags or windows in cardboard products. And they are touted as being, in the case of cellophane, sometimes they're touted as being home compostable, and sometimes they're touted as being industrially compostable. And we'll come on to that in a moment when we look at what that exactly means. But in the list of products above, the wood, the paper, the card products, wood, paper and card have been put on compost heaps for years, and gardeners are quite happy in it taking more than 90 days. So I would argue that there are some products in the compostables list that are of little concern, and some products like PLA, especially CPLA and RCPLA, that are a real concern, and they don't break down. They will last in the environment for hundreds of years, just like oil-based plastic. So, let me just switch this off for a moment. Everybody see me?
Yeah, we can see. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. It's always more difficult online than it is in a room. So this, can everybody see that cup? Okay. So this is a cornstarch cup, and this is made from PLA. And the way that you can tell this is you can't see this, but there is a triangle at the bottom. And inside that triangle is the number 7. And the number 7 is a category of plastic that is a catch-all. It's a catch-all for any plastic that is not either PET or HDPE or LDPE, sorry, or polypropylene and so on. But this plastic cup here, this will last, if discarded incorrectly, will last in the environment for hundreds of years. There is, for our lifetimes, no difference between this and an oil-based cup as far as disposal is concerned. Now, the good news is that it's not made from oil. It's not made from fossil fuel. The better news is that when it's burned in an incineration, which is a popular way of avoiding landfill these days, it only releases the methane that is contained within the plants used to make it. But if it's discarded, and please remember that the figures on waste state that only 13% of product has ever been recycled. The vast majority of product goes to waste or is out in the ether. And if this lands in the sea, this will still be floating around in the sea in 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, up to 200 years. It does not break down. products like these, excuse me, products like these kind of coffee cups, and you can get soup containers. So these products, yes, they may be a bit more responsible in that they've got forestry stewardship council approval for the paper that they're being made, but they're lined with PLA. It's a plastic. They can't be recycled in a paper waste stream. It not corrupts, it doesn't help the paper waste stream, that's for sure. Okay. But probably worst of all is this product here. These are the lids, okay, and the straws and the cutlery, and these are made from this product CPLA, and this product will last longer in the natural environment than this product. And so just because it's compostable doesn't mean it's good for the environment. The bioplastic, unless disposed of correctly, and the correct disposal of bioplastic is general waste. Unless you have a home composter and you're very patient, or you have a home hot composter, do not put this into plastic recycling. And here's the challenge we've got. If you give one of these cups to someone in the street and you say, what's that made of? Their reaction is going to be plastic. And where do you dispose of it? Oh, I put it in my plastics recycling. Well, the trouble is that this will mess up the recycling, and this degrades the recovery of oil-based plastic. And this is the danger that we've got. Right, back to sharing screen. So I just wanted to share with you 3 statements that I came across in 2018. 2019, we didn't do too much. In 2020, we did nothing at all. But in 2018, we attended various events, both with a business hat on and other launch events from Falmouth to Morganporth, Chepstow, different events to talk about these products. And I always highlighted these 3 statements. So the first statement is, we are working to get our packaging accredited as being marine friendly. What food and drink packaging needs to be marine friendly? This almost enables people to take less care of how they're disposing of their food and drink packaging. We can offer the same type of bags I showed on the evening. They look like cellophane bags, but they're actually producing PLA plant starch. And here comes a really tricky problem for businesses. In the genesis of cellophane, it was made from wood. Cellophane comes from a wood composite. But in the 1960s, the Chinese found a way of producing a stronger cellophane in a wider variety of colors made from plastic. And I defy anyone putting those products side by side where there are no markings as there is with things like plastic cups to decide the difference between a plastic cellophane sheet and a wood cellophane sheet. That gives businesses and the consumer a real problem in making choices. So if a respected supplier turns around and says, oh yes, they're fully biodegradable and compostable, the interchanging of those terms simply confuses people. And for those wanting to make the best decision they can, and I'm a firm believer there are many businesses and consumers out there that want to make good decisions, then we need to have a better way. If this is their only choice, and we'll come on to what the better choice is a bit later, If this is their only choice, then we need a better way of helping them make that decision. But first prize went to this statement. Now, before I press the button, Vegware is a market leader in compostable products, and they try very, very hard to protect their brand. They try very, very hard to promote composting as a waste source, and they try as hard as they possibly can to control the distributors who are selling their product. But one of the largest distributors in the Southwest, said this: Vegware is good for landfill. Well, nothing's good for landfill, as we all know. And Vegware a Vegware bioplastic cup will last in landfill as long as an oil-based cup. It simply won't break down. The environment it will find itself in is just simply not akin for it to be composted. And to start selling these products as a product that is good for landfill is, to be blunt, irresponsible. I work in this industry and I cringe every time I hear someone positioning these products in the way they shouldn't be positioned. The problem is this: a manufacturer will give the distributor some product to sell, and they will give them some training. The distributor then pulls out the bits that they'd like to tell you, knowing full well that all they're interested in is profit before planet. So they will then position those products to the retailer in such a way that the retailer will think that they're doing the best thing. Trouble is, the retailer gets the messages from the distributor. So imagine turning up, getting a coffee, and your coffee shop says, "Yeah, we're still using takeaway cups because I've been told they're good for landfill." So what underpins all this? Well, there was actually a composting accreditation, and it's a worldwide accreditation, and it defines the difference between something that is hot compostable, and this is something that composts at 60 degrees centigrade, or something that is home compostable, something that will compost at 20 degrees centigrade. Home compostable is a real minefield. I talk to people about composting every day of my life. It's one of the products that we sell, and I talk at length with people about how they do their composting, what their challenges are, and very rarely do I come across someone that composts beautifully every single time. It's a natural process, and if you have an open compost, it's quite reasonable to state that your compost heap will be on the edges colder than it is in the middle. That isn't rocket science. So with a compostable product, if it's in the center of a compost and it's home compostable, then it's likely to break down. But if it's on the edge of the compost, it won't. So the problem I have with it is the accreditation allows companies to glibly say this is home compostable. And the problem there is that these accreditations were acquired in a laboratory. They don't take account of the facilities that people have at home. They don't take account of how interested people are in composting. Do they just chuck their food waste and a bit of cardboard on their composting every week? Or are they out there every day stirring? So there are a lot of assumptions. But products are positioned right at the front, be they magazine wraps from the National Trust, be they polythene bags coming, well, not polythene, but carrier bags, sorry, coming out from the co-op. Oh yeah, they're all compostable, they're all home compostable. Well, doesn't mean they're going to get composted. But perhaps the biggest problem around all of this is that if you wanted to advertise your product as being compostable, and you had some sort of evidence that would offer that as being feasible, and that could be some kind of Chinese accreditation, because please remember, most of these products are not made in the UK. In the case of all all vegware products. Their coffee cups are made in the British Isles, Southern Ireland, and all their other products are made in China or in the Far East in Taiwan. So not only is there a real challenge once the product's here in terms of consumers understanding the impact these products have on the environment, but also they're creating a huge carbon footprint from their arrival coming into the UK. And furthermore, these accreditations aren't mandatory, they're not law. You can do it if you want to do it. So any one of you attending this evening and I tomorrow could talk with China, decide on a company name, bring some product in and advertise we're selling compostable products. That's how dangerous this is. And increasingly there are new companies coming into the market. And I asked them, because they always call, will you range our products? Are they Vincotti accredited? And more often than not, I get the answer back, what is Vincotti? So here we have a potentially horrendous situation where products that are, say, made of PLA, like the cold cup I showed you earlier, coming into the country, and there is no accreditation to state whether it is PLA or is it oil-based plastic and it's just been stamped. There's no approval by the government. There's no customs gating system to make sure the product coming in is what it says. And for the greater part, these products get put into general waste streams and are either incinerated or put into landfill before anyone can catch up. So it is an absolute golden opportunity for people who want to put profit before plans and to bring in products, put a fancy label. The typical one is a green band around a cup, and then sell it as a compostable item, and seemingly everyone's happy. But the reality is that it is fraught with difficulty. So, kind of covered that. So what we really need in this country is a mandatory law around the standards. The current government anyway have been constantly reassuring that food standards won't drop as we go through this transition out of Europe. And I'm pretty at times angry that they aren't looking at some of the other areas that are impactful on our natural environment, and also obviously impactful on our waste streams. So I think I'll give you an example later that I think the inaccurate picturing of environmentally friendly products should be made aggressively more illegal than it currently is. It's a bit of a trip at the moment, I'm afraid, if you want to take someone down that road and hold them to account for the claims that they're being made. But I do have one example later. So between Matt Baker on the One Show and primetime TV and the marketing that is being pushed out by companies, Coca-Cola with their first paper bottle, aluminium we're being told aluminium is the wonder product and be constantly recycled, even though it's lined with plastic. We're being told that paper can be recycled. We're being told compostables are a really, really good way forward. And all of that can be brought into question. But there is one thing I will highlight. The problem with compostables is the waste stream. A big problem, or one big problem with compostables is the waste stream. And in 2018, Animal Health and the Environment Agency lifted the ban. The ban was in place because of mad cow disease and foot and mouth, and the transmission of germs around those diseases, because typically in drinks, be it milkshake or be it tea or be it coffee, you can't guarantee that milk residue will not be left in the waste. And the government were really, really strict on this and said, if there is any chance of a milk residue on a product, then it cannot go into any green waste streams. And so the government at that, probably just before that time, focused quite heavily on a waste stream called anaerobic digestion. And this is marketed as an energy for waste. This is a great way in which our waste can be turned into energy. And the compostable waste streams got overlooked, and they still are to this day. There are some areas, I believe Yorkshire's pretty strong on compostable waste, and companies like Vedro set up their own. And they've now covered, I think, it's around 2/3 of all UK postcodes with a business-to-business composting collection, which allows that waste to be turned into compost and returned to our soils. But generally speaking, for the consumer, if you get a compostable product and you take it home, typically it gets put into general waste. So let's give an example. Normally at this point, ask anybody if they've heard of Snacked. So Snacked is a company that claims that, and you'll see it at the bottom, our packaging is home compostable, helping us to reduce waste even further. So I know Snack quite well, and I know the company that make their packaging very well, because at the time when they were wishing to launch into the UK, they contacted me and said, what can you do for us in the Southwest? And I had a look at their products and told them I wouldn't touch them with a barge pole. They are now one of the largest companies in compostable packaging in the world. Israeli company. They helped the world's first plastic-free supermarket open in Europe, and got a lot of wonderful positive plaudits. But if you look very, very carefully at this slide shows you a product called Lamb 106. We won't get too technical, but this is Lamb 106, and into this goes the Snacked, the Snack product. Their kind of impulse eats of allegedly healthy snacks that you can gorge on should you feel a bit peckish. If you look at the last bullet point on this slide, this is directly from their catalogue. This is 65% bio-based. That means it's 35% oil-based. And because they are able to process this in a laboratory under laboratory conditions and reduce the end waste down to an acceptable percentage, they get away with this being compostable. But even in their own catalogue, they state clearly that it is a hot compostable product. It is a product that will only compost at 60 degrees centigrade. It is not a home compostable product. Yet, here we have a company selling their snacks, literally, telling us that their product, the packaging of their product, is home compostable. It's a simple, blatant lie. So, I hope you've all got your sound on. I want to show you this.
Our country is really drowning in an ocean of plastic pollution. They take up to 200 years to decompose.
So, Avanti were a company going back a couple of years that were right at the forefront of making people aware that there are biodegradable bags. This was kind of before national charities and organisations started to use the compostable magazine wraps, and certain supermarkets were offering compostable bags. And it was seen as a bit of a revolution. It got a lot of real positive feedback on social media, and they wanted to enter the UK. And they were kind enough to produce a video which explains what their product's about. And on the face of it, it looks quite enticing. Right, but there's some things that are wrong here, very wrong. So the first thing, we're promoting here biodegradability in a marine environment. Now, the single use is a real problem in any environment. And if you encourage people to believe that the single-use product they're using will have a lesser impact on the natural environment, you've got less of a chance of discouraging single use. The one obvious thing to say is these bags don't just break down, they're breaking up into tiny pieces. And as that process occurs, they say very clearly, and they're very proud of the fact that within 150 days, these products would have broken down into their natural form. Well, I look at it slightly differently. I look at it as it being 150 days of threat to the natural environment. The problem with wildlife consuming plastic is not that it's poisoning them. It's the fact that it's filling their stomachs, stopping them eating food. So when they think they're not hungry, because they've got bellyfuls of plastic, they don't eat. But because they've got bellyfuls of plastic, they can't consume anymore, and they think they don't need to. So often wildlife is dying from hunger more so than it is dying from any kind of poison that plastic could give to them. And the problem with this product is that it doesn't address that problem. And there's the underpinning issue of I'm stating that there's a problem, but look, if it goes into the natural environment, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Look, animals in the natural environment, they won't be affected. So for some of us that are a little bit more inquisitive about this and a bit more hardened on our views as to what should be in the ocean and what shouldn't be in the ocean, this is unacceptable. But for the other bulk of people that we are often aiming our messaging at and trying to educate and convince them that there are different ways that they can consume food as a takeaway, trying to get them to buy or use reusable cups and so on. If you're saying to someone who goes to a beach, use this bag, don't worry about it. If it hits if it goes into the sea, it'll be okay. And the problem is many people don't take, and it's not their fault, but they haven't got time to look into the nuances of this. So if they see a film where a bag is breaking down in an ocean environment, then it reinforces that message that it will just be okay, and it's not. As for the consumption of a bag by humans, I put this point in probably more as humour than anything else. But the fact that a single-use bag can be consumed by humans just seems a little bit odd. But the biggest point here is this, and I alluded to it earlier. This bag is made from what's called bagasse, but in that manufacturing process, they use a petrol-based byproduct. And if you think back to the snack packaging What we are being told, or where it's being implied, that because it's compostable, it's a natural product, it often isn't. But these nuances aren't for people haven't got time to investigate down to this level of detail, because if they did, they would probably be making different decisions. The products that are claimed to be 100% natural need to be challenged, and the answers often lie in the materials that they're made from. So let's talk about a big one. Let's talk about plastic roads. I was at an awards ceremony about a year and a half ago, and didn't win. Probably too on the hard line of environmentalism, I'd imagine. But a company did win because they had they developed plastic roads, and I developed this slide way before that ceremony, so it gave me a bit of an opportunity to talk to them in detail. And although they were positioning themselves as experts, it just exemplified to me the problem that we've got with this. So the IUCN, I'd urge you all to check out the IUCN. The IUCN was the organisation that came up with the 700,000 microfiber number from washing machines, from a wash cycle. They're an amazing organisation. Their resources are free of charge, and they cover a vast array of different subjects. But they talked about this issue, and this is a few years ago. They talked about this issue of microplastics and nanoplastics and microfibers that find their way into the environment. Now, I was asked in Birmingham once, how does tyre dust get from Spaghetti Junction into the Bristol Channel? And we talked about this briefly before. So it's very simple. The tyre comes off as dust off the car tyre onto the road, and it rains. It washes into the drainage system, goes through a filtration plant that everybody thinks takes out everything, and it doesn't, because it's too small and it's not financially feasible to get down to that level. Although if things keep going the way they're going, then perhaps they may have to. And then it gets into the river system, and then from the river system it will end up in the ocean. And that's assuming that it's gone down the drain. If it gets, if you're in another part of the country, and your road is next to a river, then the wash of rain from the road through the fields will end up in the river and obviously take you out to sea. That's kind of how this works. There's no filtration system on the on the rivers to kind of cope with this stuff. So what's the problem with plastic roads? Well, there's minimal field testing that's been done for the environmental impact. Now, maybe this is the best thing, the best use for all the plastic that we've got. And when we come to do landfill mining and we start to extract what's been disposed of over generations, maybe this is the best that we can do. But we need to do some proper field testing first. We need to get roads that are plastic properly tested. The current standards that are set do not go to the detail that these roads, I believe, demand. So when they're heated up, they release poisonous gases. That's what happens with plastic. The plastics that's used is similar to microbeads, and there is very, very limited research on the effect on the soil, rivers, oceans from this plastic. So plastic roads degrade. They may last longer, and maybe that's the compromise that we've all got to get used to, is that if we accept that plastic roads are a way forward, then as they degrade, we've also got to accept that there's a strong likelihood that the microfibers coming from those roads will end up in the ocean, and it's going to be impactful on the ocean. So I think there's probably some decisions to come, But plastic roads is a great example where you think on the face of it, that's really good idea. What a great idea. It lasts a bit longer. It is using a waste product. Allegedly, it's better on tyres, although I haven't seen any science that sits behind that, but it's logical. But we also need to be asking the questions, using our own common sense from our understanding of what happens with microplastics, without wanting to totally undermine next month's presentation. The report that was produced back in 2016 that cited 700,000 microfibers from a wash. I have to be careful with that number. That number came from some tests that were done with a new clothes wash. And with new clothes, and of course fast fashion is a factor here, when you put it into a washing machine, these bits, of course, they'll break off, and because there isn't a filtration system worthy of coping with these bits, the grey water will end up eventually in the ocean, and with a huge amount of micro plastic. And that, of course, we're now seeing an increasing number of reports that this microplastic is in our food chain, and although I think it's going to take some time to come before the science backs up some of these claims, because there's not a great incentive from business to really get behind getting into what impact their operations on land are having on the sea. Personally, I'd like to see them get get some real scientific testing behind each of these different threats caused by microfibers. And there's no proper testing today on these roads, apart from the standard building testing, that examines to, I would argue, a sensible degree how the plastics from the degradation of these roads can impact the ocean. Right, here was a win. Advertising Standards Authority. So, for all of you out there that have dogs, you may have come across, biodegradable poop bags, for want of a better expression. And this particular company, Ancol, were claiming that your dog could lessen its impact on the environment, which is an interesting concept to me, I have to say. But on this occasion, the Advertising Standards Authority received a complaint, only one complaint. And it prompted, for me, a very interesting discussion, because the problem with greenwash is you need quite a bit of money to get people to court to prove that what they're claiming is untrue. And often, especially with the larger companies, they have behind them people with a vested interest to see them continuing. And the plastics industry has the oil industry behind it. And that's a difficult opponent to win against. But when people make claims in an advertisement, be that a website listing or be it a magazine advertisement, if they make these claims and they can't be substantiated, then they are open to prosecution. And Ancol pet products were prosecuted for this. And all they did was put an advertisement on a web listing that claimed their waste bags were biodegradable, and it was read by someone who is a strong environmentalist. So I wanted to also to highlight to you DEFRA's report on polystyrene packaging. The switch to compostables was typically away from a polystyrene product, and the arguments over which is better in some cases, or whether compostable packaging has a benefit, I think in the very early days in 2018, certainly on the plastic-free movement, we saw the compostable packaging as an improvement. But the work I did with Surface Against Sewage just highlighted the need to be focusing on reuse and focusing on messaging that reduced or eliminated single use. And that's okay with the plastic-free communities and those, I call it, within our church. But the work that we do will be more impactful if we can talk to people who don't go to our church. And those people, the nuance of what polystyrene packaging is, passes them by. If they feel hungry with their family and they want a burger and it's in a polystyrene clamshell, then parents don't necessarily, all of them anyway, think about this. So I just wanted to kind of run you through this. So DEFRA reported on polystyrene packaging. This was the report. It was released in October 2019. We as taxpayers paid £15,000 for it to be produced, and they made a couple of conclusions. And the one conclusion was that overall the findings of the research are supportive of a legislative ban for EPS packaging. Now, underneath it said, and it's a report that's 123 pages long. It's easily downloadable, but these were the salient points from me. Was firstly that the report concluded that DEFRA should be in support of a legislative ban, and secondly that the stakeholders that these guys talked to, Resource Futures talked to, were indicated that a ban is feasible. Now, obviously, there's been a bit of water under the bridge since October 2019, including a pandemic and a general election. But I think it's one of my missions is to get this back on the government's agenda. Now, single use is bad, reuse is good. That's the simple message. But in settings where single use is currently demanded and it's difficult to stop that, then compostable food and drink packaging is better than oil-based packaging. That's for sure, because it's not using fossil fuel, and that's the simple justification. But we need to get really to a point where we are reusing and not going down constantly a single use. But we've got a battle on our hands, and this is why the Food Packaging Association gave a response to the DEFRA's EPS ban. And the bit that caught my eye was their objection to the EPS ban on the grounds of material discrimination. Now, there are many areas of society where discrimination is present and we don't want to see it. But I'm quite sure that EPS being discriminated against is not something that we want to promote. And the farcical level of argument that the Food Service Packaging Association have put forward here is almost laughable. We can't change from EPS because we're discriminating against it, which it's partially makes me laugh and partially simply astounds me. So, the conclusions. Compostable products, they're a step forward, but they're definitely not the silver bullet. And for those that would suggest so, you can talk to them about how discarded PLA will last in the natural environment for as long as oil-based products and pose as big a threat when discarded in that way to our wildlife as oil-based products. Reuse is the impact, is the mantra here, and reducing the impact of single use. We don't want to fix single use, we want to reduce single use. And while we're on that journey, compostables are a better option than the oil-based products. But the real problem here is overconsumption, and single use fuels that. We are consuming the Earth's resources at a pace that the Earth can't keep up with. And if you go and look at some of the numbers around food waste alone, they're astounding. And we've got into this societal thinking of things are disposable, and if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And if you're able to easily take away food or buy food when you're out, then it just encourages a consumption that perhaps a more prudent approach would not see, and it most certainly motivates single use. So here are some thoughts I want to leave you with, and I think the biggest one, which I'll dwell on, is the value of nature. If we were at this point and I was in a room, I'd be jumping up and down now and talking about McDonald's. So I see our natural environment in the same way I see my new lounge carpet. So my question to people is, if you also see it that way, then you wouldn't put your McDonald's wrapper throw it onto your carpet. But it seems to be acceptable because we can all drive down dual carriageways and we can see the amount of litter. And I know some of that litter is accidental, I accept that, but there are always examples of litter that have been, say, chucked from a car window. And my argument is this: if we valued nature in the same way that we valued our lounge carpet, we wouldn't be treating it in the way that we're currently treating nature as a society. And one of the great opportunities here is by getting people connected with nature, they can see the value of it and they'll want to protect it. And that is a journey. That is a journey that starts with a relationship with nature, and often seeing something that is pretty horrific, that is impacting nature, and then learning as to why that was caused, and that, I hope, will start to change human behaviour, and we become more respectful of our natural environment. Before I go, or stop, or answer your questions, we launched a bodyboard campaign back in October that now, as Greg had highlighted, we found ourselves on various kind of news channels, national press, and tomorrow on ITV, which is all a good bit of fun, a lockdown project, if you like. But we're now calling on the government to ban these cheap polystyrene bodyboards. Now, these boards are made from an expanded polystyrene, and I wanted to highlight one thing to you because it's relevant to the polystyrene packaging as well, and that is polystyrene is not recyclable. EPS is not recyclable. You cannot change that polymer back so you can make something else from it. You can repurpose it, and it's used in North Devon. It's used, these discarded boards, for example, are used to keep beehives warm. The polystyrene can be broken down and put into the side of houses as cavity wall insulation. I'm not totally convinced that's the right use for it, but those are examples, sorry, of repurposing of polystyrene. Now, these boards are made from the same, if not similar, material as the polystyrene food and drink packaging, and I want to have a conversation with government directly as to what they're going to do about EPS. And the key to the door are cheap polystyrene bodyboards. If you go to that website, it will take you through to a parliamentary petition, and if we can get 10,000 respondents, we'll get a response from government, which will be interesting. But if we can get to 100,000, and we've got until the 11th of August to do it, then we get, in a sense, our day in court. And with the help, you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner, a letter of support for this campaign from Sir Geoffrey Cox, MP. You may have come across him when he was Attorney General in the previous government. And he's right behind this campaign. And in fact, and I'll make these slides available, if you read that letter, it sounds like a letter from Extinction Rebellion more than it is a letter from a Knight of the Realm, an Attorney General in with a blue hat on, shall we say. These EPS is an evil product, and it is something that we need to get rid of our landscape. And from our landscape, and while we go on this journey of understanding what are the alternatives, I would strongly urge you not to get drawn into the argument of whether compostables are better than non-compostables, oil-based products. The big one to win is human behavior change, is to reuse. Recycling is not the answer. It is not the ultimate answer. It is better than where we are. But reusing products and removing single use from our world will have great benefits to our natural environment for many, many generations to come. Everyone awake?
Fantastic. Yeah. Can I? Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. It was that was an epic presentation. Incredible. Yeah, quite incredible that. So thank you so much for that. It was really insightful. And yeah, the presentation will be recorded. It's all been recorded. This, so you would come back to any of this at any point once it's up on YouTube. So thanks a lot for sticking with us but yeah, it was really insightful. So thank you so much. And I think Brenda had a question about approaching Client Earth to challenge untruths in the court.
Right.
Are you aware of Client Earth?
Not aware. No. I'm just getting up to there now.
Brenda, do you want to come in?
Yeah, well, actually, a week ago, I hadn't heard of Client Earth, but on Sunday night, I think it was, Liz Bonin did a fantastic podcast with Brian Eno and a guy called James Lansdale, who is Client Earth. Basically, he's a world level lawyer. He's funded by people like Brian Eno, and they take these people who tell lies to court, basically, and have won some fantastic court cases. They are the ones who stopped that massive coal-fired power station in Poland. They took them to the European court and they won. They have immense power and they really do know what they're talking about, and they're worth being on your team.
Let's employ him, Greg, tomorrow.
I put you a link in there.
Definitely. No, it's really useful. Definitely worth checking out. There's another question. Alice shared in the chat about a vegan veg grower looking at considering the transport of packaging and products. That's really important as well. And she shared a link in there. I can any links that I put in the chat, I can share around with everyone afterwards as well.
It's hugely important, Greg, and it's often overlooked. And in the quest to become greener, people say, "Oh, compostables." Well, okay, yes, they are a step better than oil-based plastic, because oil-based plastic has an even greater carbon emissions. But the compostables can show embodied carbon reductions, that's for sure. But the upshot is, you're right, it's still got to be moved from A to B, and that in itself is a for stuff that's going to be used for anything up to less than 20 minutes or length an hour. It just seems appalling to me.
Yeah. Dave, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute and?
Yes, thanks, Greg. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I completely agree with your focusing on reduce and reuse. Out of the 3 R's, those are what we should be focusing on, not recycling. But I've got a question about bagasse.
Yeah.
If that's how you pronounce it, but
yeah.
if we're going to use something that is, I think, compostable, does that sort of tick the boxes better than anything else?
Bagasse as a material is better than EPS, than polystyrene. Let's say that's a safe position to take. Okay, the amount of packaging that we use worldwide is immense, and there'll come a tipping point, I would imagine, where the product has such demand that there is there's a chance that we may have, if we continue with the material, we may have to grow it. Okay, grow it for packaging, which is frighteningly ridiculous in my mind. Okay, at this point in time, I have to say, mainly thanks to America, the consumption of sugar is very, very high, and so the growing of this of the product from the waste of which is used to make bagasse, we're probably not touching the sides at the moment. But I wouldn't and never try to focus too much on the benefits of bagasse. And it is a home compostable product. It's like a cardboard, okay? And if you're decent at composting in a home composting, then yes, it will break down. There are no additives. It's simply crushed, okay? It's simply crushed and formed into these different sized clamshells. But these nuances and these benefits and these wonder materials, and a lovely story that it's a waste product, can overshadow what we should be doing, and that's reusing and encouraging people down paths where we're using the same product over and over again. I've talked locally with various kind of takeaways, and if somebody came up to them, there are some challenges, okay, but if somebody came up to them and gave them a plate, for example, and said, "Can you put fish and chips on that?" They'd do it. And I think where we're at is we've just become a little too used to and accepting that we can go to the fish and chip shop, or we can go to the takeaway at the beachside, and we don't take our own utensils or our own container to eat food from, and we accept that we have to take, a fish and chips in a clamshell is kind of okay. And perhaps in the same way the journey on coffee refill started, and there was lots of resistance to that, and organisations like City to Sea have done a fantastic job, even in lockdown, in how to serve coffee, refill coffee during lockdown with all the restrictions. I think we've got to tackle that area as well with the same vigour and passion. Bagasse is a lovely product, but it's not the silver bullet.
Yeah, really, really useful that. And there's we have Steph who runs Zero Waste Shop in Chesterfield. Steph Sustainable Stuff. She always brings her own container to the chip shop, and she, that's what she does. She takes her container to the chip shop and she says, "Can you put my chips in here?" And they do it. So yeah, absolutely, yeah. So it's just kind of getting into that mindset, isn't it? Obviously, COVID has proved to be an issue with a lot of people kind of staying at home, not wanting to go out to takeaways, and people getting home deliveries and things. And that COVID's definitely, I feel, added to the problem. But it's a real challenge out there, and I think takeaways definitely something we need to look at moving forwards. But I want to move on, and Jill said that she said you talked about plastic roads, but said little about tires themselves. They are plastic too. So what is the solution? So this is as much a problem for electric vehicles as well as fossil fuel-based vehicles. Public
transport is a solution. Reducing the tyre mileage is the obvious solution here. It's not practical for everybody, but whether you're in an electrical vehicle or not, as you rightly say, Jill, your tyres are still on the road and they're still degrading, and every 10 to 15,000 miles you'll be needing to change them. So we may have fixed the emissions, but we haven't fixed that. What we need to do is to get more people into into vehicles that are moving, and whether that's public transport or whether it's car sharing and so on. We need to reduce the actual car. We need to reduce car mileage. or vehicle mileage. That's what we need to do. And that will have benefits both for emissions and with this. Some of these areas, I have to say, it's not a cop-out, but there are simply, sometimes it hasn't been invented yet. It hasn't been invented yet. And that's mainly because there isn't the incentive for the larger companies to put money into the research and development. I'd urge you all to go and have a look at BP's accounts. Okay, I'm not anti-business, far from it, but I'd urge you to go and look at BP's accounts and examine what their research and development budget is for energy and for polymers and the like, versus their lobbying budget in the US to keep plastic in play. The one's about $15 million, the other's $450 million. I think you can guess which way round it is. So there are some difficult areas, and perhaps at this stage with cars, the answer is look at public transport wherever you can. It's not convenient for everybody, and let's see if we can get car sharing working properly.
Yeah, it's going to be a real challenge. Yeah, absolutely, always going to be an issue. So I think John said, I tried home composting some of these plastics. I've now put them in the green bin. Have I got that right? Well, that's a £1 million question. Yeah, everyone's got different types of bins. So
yeah. What normally goes in the green bin?
John, do you want to come? Did you want to come in and unmute yourself? If you're still here.
Hi, I'm not really John, but
oh, okay.
It was all the magazine wrappers. I was putting them in the compost, and then I signed up to, I think it was UCL did a big compost project last year.
That's right, yeah.
Signed up to. When I came to turn the compost, there was all the bags there, and it worked out there was at least 11 months worth of magazine wrappers that had hardly degraded at all. So at that point, I dropped out of the compost project, took them all out. Then we have a green bin that is, it's what I use it for is stuff that's too woody to go in my compost bin. So it's literally green waste, but it says that you can put in it these compostable things. So that's where I'm now putting it. I'm now not sure I'm putting it in the right bin. So we have the general waste bin, we have the recycling bin, and then we have the green bin. This is High Peak.
So the short answer is your default is your general waste bin. Okay, that's the short answer. The composting program that you participated in, I followed as well. But I'm lucky or fortunate, because I've got a hot bin composter, and that does work at up to 60 degrees, and I can break these plastics down. But I'm also a bit of a nerd with composting, yeah, and I'm kind of out there, well, most days, having a little look to see what temperature it is and whether I need to do something else with it and giving it stirring. Most people don't do that. Most people don't. Most people, the idea of composting is something at the bottom of the garden. It gets grass cuttings, it gets the vegetable shavings, and then we'll stick some twigs on it and a bit of cardboard, and away we go. That's kind of what it is. And these home compostable products, if they find themselves below a 20 degrees centigrade in a 20 degrees centigrade compost, and it tends to vary between 18 and 25 degrees. So if you've got a compost, without being, I'll be blunt but not blaming, okay? If you don't look after your compost, you will be below the temperature threshold for these home compostable products. So people just put them into their compost like they would do with their vegetable shavings, and they won't break down. But with that said, going back to that composting scientific experiment, there were several gardeners that they introduced as you went down the line through the program, and they said, well, I'll just put it back in. And for a lot of gardeners, sometimes stuff just doesn't break down. The compost doesn't work. It's a natural process. It's not like turning a tap on and out comes water. There are lots of factors in the natural world that even in your composting, sometimes your compost doesn't work. It's frustrating, but the issue that I've got with it is that the general public believe because it's compostable, you just put it in there and it just breaks down. And there just needs to be more work done to say, well, it can break down, not it will break down. That's the issue for me.
There was just a follow-on point about that. Is there, like Laura was saying, can you recommend a particular hot composter that people can use? That people can buy?
I'm running a line here, Greg. Okay, I'm running a line here. Okay, well, I can. Okay, I can, and that is the hot bin composter. And if you look at hotbincomposting.com, you'll find and ironically, and this is all irony, it's made from an EPS product. Okay. Which is so ironic, but at least it has a lifespan of 10 to 15 years. So perhaps you shouldn't be too harsh on it. But the way that works is it insulates the heat that's naturally generated in the composting process. And Vegware and the like, even Which magazine have tested this product, and it will get you up to temperatures of between 40 and 60 degrees centigrade. And 60 degrees centigrade is considered to be the standard of an industrial composter. Most hot composters are not priced for the consumer. A municipal hot composter can cost you £250,000. So with composters, and they use energy, whereas something like the home hot bin is just using a natural process and insulating heat. What is termed an industrial composter is typically an electric driven thing. It will break it down. It will break down any bioplastics in 12 weeks, but you've got to have quite a big field to put it in and £250,000 to pay for it. So I think probably look at something like the hot bin and look at some of the Which magazine reports on that product. And that's probably your answer there.
Thanks for that. That's really useful. Debbie said Bristol Waste has advised me that Bristol Council are encouraging coffee shops to move away from vegware and the like to save their money and to revert to plastic lined cups because the compostable cups are not the answer and mess up recycling. Is that a backward step or not, as presumably the recycling rates will be better if not contaminated by the wrong type of cup?
Contamination, that was the word I was looking for earlier. Contamination. I think that whole area is, I mean, remember it's the home of City to Sea. So that whole area is talking refill. It's talking reuse. It's talking about, and the retailers there are encouraging people to take their own cups. And ultimately that is the best course of action. It is very true that compostable cups contaminate waste streams. They should go into general waste, and we can be explicit about that, because there aren't any compostable waste streams. Trouble is, people look at them as being cardboard or paper and stick them in the cardboard or paper. Now, there's another truism here as well, that the plastic lined cups, if you remember a couple of Christmases ago, everyone got really, really anxious about plastic lined coffee cups, which was the start of this whole move towards compostable cups. Well, if you look at a company called Simply Cups or a company called James Cropper, they are recycling oil-based plastic lined cups today. They still are. And in the case of Simply Cups, they produce products out the back of that, including garden benches and fencing and other homeware items. It's not a great plastic. And I can tell you now, a child's bench takes 30,000 coffee cups to make. Okay, so it's perhaps not a, it's an example of how you can use it. If the recycling is getting mixed up, then there either needs to be a ban or there needs to be better education. For Vegware's part, they've got the Composting Collective, which is very active within the Bristol community, and I would imagine sits alongside that. But if people can't do it, then we have to accept it needs to stop. And ultimately, plastic lined coffee cups plastic coffee cups are better than plastic lined coffee cups because it's a single material and typically will be made for reuse. A plastic cup is going to be better. I mean, we can't be too precious about this. Yeah, I prefer to use a plastic cup 100 times in the year than 100 plastic lined cups. And I think it's that tone and that balance of argument we need to be kind of quite careful with.
I think what they're trying to do is to get all the coffee shops to have recycling centre or recycling points. So they might not use vegware, so they won't be using vegware. They'll go back to using the other kind, the Costa type cups, right? And they'll have recycling points in the cafes, and then Bristol Waste will come and empty those, and then they can go off to specialist recycling that can do that. So it's a sort of way forward, and the businesses are happy because it saves them half the price because the vegware is a lot more expensive, and they've got notices up, and they're going to put notices up so that the consumers, the people that go in the shop, can see why they've gone back to using the. It'll be interesting.
Debbie, sorry, Debbie, and sorry, everyone else. Sort of a question and a statement at the same time. Question for Andrew. I run a park, and there is a cafe in the park, and unfortunately, the cafe spends the extra on getting compostable cups, vegware type ones, but gets black lids because the black lids were cheaper. I've persuaded him to change it to white plastic lids because the white plastic is recyclable in North Somerset and black plastic isn't, because it's a crazy world. My question is, we collect all the coffee cups that come out of the bins and we return them to Costa, who then send them to a paper mill and turn them back into more coffee cups. I'm not promoting Costa, but it's brilliant that they do that. You know? What happens if vegware type cups are in that? I don't know if that's contaminating, that word, contaminating their lot, and we are wasting the time because we can't tell the difference sometimes.
Okay, so the fact is that when a paper mill receives these cups, they push it into a pulp. It's a simple process. They push it into a pulp and the plastic floats to the top. I'm being very simplistic here. Then they skim it off and off it goes. Now, PLA plastic behaves in a similar way to oil-based plastic in that setting. So the fact of the matter is, it don't really matter. You know, if you talk to someone behind the advertising at a paper mill, okay, what you've got to then factor in, and I think you can comment on this in Bristol as well, okay, is that there is still vested interest sitting behind it. Okay, so we are still using a fossil fuel for single use, and fossil fuels are not sustainable, and that is a big principle for me. So anything that doesn't use a fossil fuel has my not undivided support, but has my more qualified support. So for Bristol, don't rule out what Bristol earns from their waste collections. And if Vegware have done a really, really good job, for example, yeah, with their own coffee cups, and Vegware would only take their own coffee cups, okay, back into this composting collective. And that for Bristol, I think, is probably the problem, and possibly the problem for you. The issue is that if people say we're only going to be able to collect this, those trying to do the right thing are stuck in the middle. They're torn on one side because they don't want to use oil-based plastic because it's a fossil fuel, and they don't single use, and so compostable seems a logical thing. And on the other side of the coin, they're getting a bit scared that they're contaminating waste streams. Yeah, and that's a very, very difficult thing. My advice is you can only work in the environment you're in. You can only work in the environment that you're in. And if your waste collections, which are key, certainly at the moment, or other legislation arrives to reduce single use, waste collections are of paramount importance. Now, pushing all that to one side, here's something else to consider. If you're living in an area where your general waste collection goes to incineration, okay, the modern incinerator produces less particles of let's call it dust, okay, produces less particles of dust through its chimneys per square metre than a home log fire.
Oh.
Okay. This is why the government introduced legislation around home log fires. I think it came in this year, or it's got delayed, or probably because of COVID, it's got delayed, whatever. Yeah. But the amount of particles per square metre, yeah, is quite a considerable increase over the incineration. Now, also within incineration, this may surprise you. It makes me giggle a little bit. There's a schoolboy sense of humour. Okay, in the filters that are in the top of the these chimneys, this is a raw material that's used to make gypsum, and gypsum is a plasterboard. Okay, now with the incineration, what's left is an almost and it's certainly in Bristol, this was a really, really big thing about 2 years ago, with a processing plant for the ashes of incineration. Okay, it's called bottom ash. Okay, and bottom ash, there was a processing plant in Bristol, and Bristol Council really messed up the licensing and the arrangements there, and it was all in the press, and everybody got really, pitchforks on the village green stuff and what have we. But the upshot is that this bottom ash that comes out of incinerators around the country is allowed into the aggregates that are building our school buildings. In fact, the law is you can have up to 20% of this material in your aggregates. So here's the thing, yeah, if you put your stuff into a waste stream that goes to incineration, okay, yes, you're creating some energy for waste. You're possibly even creating a plasterboard that will line your children's toilets in school that are inside a building made from an aggregate of the bottom ash that came from the incineration in the first place. That's all possibility. The problem is with all of this, and I reiterate again, is we're drawn into this rabbit hole as to why, almost justifying why we're using these products. Yeah. And the fact is, it takes us away from discussing with people why they should be reusing. Yeah, and it's very energy sapping. It's very energy sapping. But which is the best thing that you can do? My advice is you can only do what you can do. And if the rules are this, you've got to do this. You can lobby, you can pressure, you can educate, you can inform, you can find all of this information on your on Google. It's all Googleable. The thing that went on in Bristol when I started, and it is a bit of a rabbit hole, I started looking at it, and it was quite remarkable the process the community went through. But I do get slightly concerned when we have a massive amount of waste and we've got to do something with it. And I accept that whilst we have the reusable argument and we keep pushing people down that, we're still producing this waste. And perhaps incineration is better than landfill. It's digging up the natural environment can't be a good thing. So it's very difficult. You can only do what you can do.
Thanks, Andrew. That was great. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's really sort of a great answer.
The things you learn in plastic-free communities, huh?
Definitely. Can I ask Maggie? I think Maggie and Tom wanted to ask a question because they had their hand up a while ago. Do you want to unmute both?
Yeah, I've just unmuted that. Sorry, just my screen a little bit. I think Maggie might have put her hand up, but I don't know what the question was because I had to go on a work call for a few minutes.
No, that's fine.
I only wanted to ask very quickly. Thank you, Greg. I was just on a call later. Our son was rung up. Plastic roads. That was complete news to me. Thank you, Andrew, for such an informative talk, and I'm so glad this is getting recorded because it's covered so much ground. There's so many questions. But my immediate one is, as a councillor, how do I know where plastic roads are? How can I find out where they are in our area?
Well, I'm guessing that your the jurisdiction on your roads and pavements normally lies with your county council, right?
County, yeah.
Ask them. Because they were going to have to approve any works
Yeah.
And unless it's a private road where you don't have jurisdiction, and it's far easier to leverage a council through political levers, is to ask them. There will be someone in charge of roads. There'll be a top bod, and then some mini bods, and then some minions. Yeah, the top bod will probably palm you off with something, but if you can find a friend inside, I'd also say to you that around 18 months ago, when people didn't really understand what plastic roads were, those doing plastic roads took great pleasure in being on telly, being in the paper, and getting themselves recorded in the media. That means that they're probably findable on social media, on Google.
Local media, yeah.
But the proper place to go would be back to the council, to the road. I don't know how your council's structured, but to go back to the council as a councillor. Yeah. In fact, a freedom of information request should do it.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to pass you over to Tom now. Going back to my son. I'm sorry, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that.
I think there was a question from Claire saying about a lot of magazines are now using bags made of potato starch rather than plastic bags for posting. Are these genuinely compostable, as they say?
Short answer, possibly. Okay? And the reason why I say that is back to this argument about how good you are at composting. So if you've got, say, a hot composter at home, they'll break down. If you've got a really well looked after composter, then will they break down within 90 days? Probably not. Okay, probably not. But sometimes when I put some of my gardening stuff into a composting environment, I don't expect it to break down in 90 days after. So will it eventually? Yes. Okay. If it's marked as being home compostable, just don't rely on the 90-day thing. You're going to miss expectations. You're going to miss your expectation, and it'll still be there when you dig in your trenches for your potatoes in October or whatever. Yeah, it takes a lot longer. Yeah, don't believe the hype. That's my message.
Yeah, I think Esme made a good point as well about until composting facilities exist on mass scale, only 3% of the UK are geared up for home composting. The best solution at the minute for plastics is recycling and recyclable plastics. Also, more collaboration is needed between key stakeholders to educate the public on how to recycle at home, so plastic waste is created instead recycled.
Yeah, great point. Great point. But again, I'd just say let's not get too sucked into that. The drum we need to keep beating is reuse. That's the drum we need to keep beating. When you go for a coffee, take your own cup. And if your cafe ain't doing it, boycott the cafe. I know I have. It does have an impact. Yeah, it does have an impact. The great thing about business is that they work on market forces. And if the demand changes, then they have to react to it because they've got, that's how a business runs. So if an increasing number of people go and choose a different cafe because they're offering refill and that cafe isn't, you'll find that cafe changing. It's a great way to leverage businesses and change. And if businesses are able, there are lots of business opportunities around reuse. You can buy a reusable cup now for about £5. Yeah, and all the major supermarkets seemingly have them in the sale all the time, which is really odd, but good news for us because it means more reusable coffee cups getting people's hands. But that's the that's my big message. Don't go down.
I think one of the frustrations is that that there was apparently there was a survey that said that for those businesses offering a discount, for example, on those who bring your own coffee cup, people just weren't coming for it. And I've heard from a lot of businesses in Chesterfield as well who've offered a discount for people who bring their own cup, but the take up just isn't there. And that's kind of the issue that we're seeing, that even when people like businesses are offering discounts for people bringing their own cup, it's
well, this is where perhaps also we need to examine the premise on which we're talking. So if you look at the Boston Tea Party, which is a chain predominantly in the Southwest, so they stopped selling coffee in takeaway cups. They don't do it anymore. That's it. and they've seen a drop in business. But they have decided as a company that they are going to put planet before profit. And although it's, well, not at the moment, obviously, but although it's recovering slightly, okay, they feel more comfortable as a business and they're still earning money. And this is part of the bit where it's very easy to get sucked into the business sympathy thing. So a little earlier, we were talking about coffee cups and the vast expense of a oil-based plastic versus compostable. Well, let's just have this right for a moment, okay? So a plastic coffee cup with a plastic lid will cost you what, 5 to 6 pence? A compostable cup will cost you about 10 pence with a lid, into which goes a cup of coffee costing 3 quid. So it's very similar to the straw argument in pubs. Okay, I watched the straw market change in October 2017. So the plastic straw was 0.5 pence, and in October 2017 the paper straw was 1.5 pence. In January 2018 it dropped to 1.1 pence, and as we were entering the summer season it bottomed out at 0.8 of a pence. Someone said to me that is a 60% increase in my straw cost. It's a 0.3 pence going into half a pint of Coke that's costing your customer £2.50. Suck it up. We're trying to save the planet. Suck it up. Yeah. So this sympathy vote, you don't hear what the numbers are. You just hear it's more expensive. But what we're actually talking about here are fractions of pence. The local, if you ever get a chance to come to Westwood Ho, yeah, I'd urge you to, because I love the places you probably picked up. But the retailers there have got it. They charge astronomical amounts of money for their, in my view anyway, sausage and chips for 4 quid. I mean, call me old fashioned, I'll take a sandwich. But they have all changed their packaging from the polystyrene EPS, and they know it's more expensive, but they made a conscious decision to do that. And here's my argument back, is you may be worried about the cost impact of your straw or your burger box rising by by 4 pence or 0.5 pence. Here's the thing. The British people have had David Attenborough beamed into their living room now for years. They understand it. And the great thing about the British consumer is that we tend not to object. So when they walk by your shop and they don't come in, they've gone to the shop down the road that has a planet before profit attitude. And you'll never find them because they won't come back because they know you're selling it with plastic. And that is quite a powerful argument, because I said this once, and I own a business, so it doesn't really pan out in one way, but it's playing the capitalists at their own game, okay? Because market forces are a very, very powerful thing. And if you can understand how to tweak that, then it can work in an environmentalist favor. That said, if you're living in an area where the waste streams can be impacted by using compostables, and you're going to cause more problem than it's worth, then you've got to have a real proper examination of that before having a discussion with people about changing. Makes our job more difficult, Greg.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. It's a complete minefield for businesses. Like, you know, this whole topic is a real difficult situation because businesses do want to be doing a good thing. And you know, we had one business, we had business on BBC Look North, sort of talking about, oh, we're using compostable cups, and it's great, but it's just so challenging because businesses do want to be seen to do the good thing by selling the compostable cups, but it's just such a confusing thing out there. And it's like, I think you summed up really well earlier, how you were sort of saying, well, it's the distributor selling the product, that they're passing their message on to the retailer, and the retailer says, oh, this is great for the customers. It's a real, you know, so the retailers being lied to, and then therefore the customers then being lied to. And I think that this is a real situation that we face, is that, yeah, you know, businesses think that they're doing good because the distributors telling them that the product is a good thing. And so, yeah, it's a real situation that we really need to look at. But hopefully, you know, if we keep pushing the message about reuse and refill, that's got to be the ultimate solution. And
that's the focus. That's it. The rest are just elastoplasts. Yeah, the focus has to be refill and reuse, and then right at the end, hopefully after a few years, then look to recycle it. But buy a little better, and reuse. It's targeting single use is the real is the real focus here, and all these other nuanced arguments and waste streams and vested interest and so on. As kind of people trying to protect the environment, we get pulled into it. And we spend half our time battling as to what's right and what's wrong. I must admit, I decided about a year and a half ago, I'm not doing that anymore. I'll talk to you about it, but I'm not doing it. I'm going to talk to you about reuse. So what's better, compostables or waste plastic? None of them, reuse. And I run a business that sells compostables. Yeah, it's a great sales pitch.
Oh wow, it's brilliant! Thank you so much, Andrew. It's been really great to have you here, and there's been people in the comments who've been saying how brilliant the talk was and how insightful it was. It's really good comments. So yeah, you've obviously enlightened a lot of people. I think we had up to 60 people, I think, joined tonight. So that was really great, and we're able to reach a lot more people. And I think the more, you know, education, knowledge is power. And so I think the more we can kind of share this out to people, yeah, it's really important. We've got to kind of get this out there, and hopefully we can kind of start looking at getting kind of this education out to kids as well, and start getting it in from an early age to, you know, to push that reuse, refill message for kids and things as well, to, you know, to say that this is the future really that we need to move forwards to. So yeah, so thank you so much for being able to.
Well, we've overrun, but the fee won't go up, Greg.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks so much for that. I'm going to stop the recording now. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thanks a lot.